Well, thank you all for gathering with Senator Menendez and I here this afternoon. Let me, if I can, just share some opening comments, and I'll turn to my colleague in New Jersey for any opening statements he has, and we'll respond to any of your questions. First of all, both of us strongly believe that terrorists who seek to destroy America must be punished for the wrongs they've committed against our country. But in order to sustain America's moral authority and win a lasting victory against these enemies, such punishment should be meted out only in accordance with the rule of law and the United States Constitution. To watch the Senate pass the Military Commissions Act last September on the anniversary of the Nuremberg trials, the 60th anniversary, was one of the saddest days I've spent in public life. Certainly, they seem to negate our great principles and traditions in support of the rule of law, and certainly, in my view, it has dishonored our nation's proud history. Today, I'm introducing, along with Senator Menendez and two other colleagues, legislation in order to undo the serious damage that has been done to our international standing and the safety of our men and women in uniform, who I believe have been put at risk with the undermining of the Geneva Conventions. I'm fortunate to have been joined here by my colleague from New Jersey, Senator Menendez, Senator Patrick Leahy of Vermont, Senator Russ Feingold of Wisconsin are also co-sponsors of the legislation. Gaining passage of the Restoration of the Constitution Act of 2007, as this bill is now entitled, will be one of my highest legislative priorities during this Congress. The Military Commissions Act must not stand, in my view. We need to get this right so that we can effectively bring terrorists to justice. We need to demonstrate that in doing so, that the process is credible and that within accepted international legal norms. That isn't going to be the case so long as the Military Commissions Act is on the books in its current form. And unlike the Military Commissions Act, this legislation will actually provide the tools necessary to bring terrorists to justice, but within the boundaries of the American legal jurisprudence and the United States Constitution. I've provided a summary of the key provisions of the bill for all of you here this afternoon, but if I can, let me just take a minute or so to point out what are the most significant changes this bill would make to existing law. First, it would restore the Habeas Corpus protections to individuals who have been detained by the United States as unlawful combatants, so the judicial branch can once again serve as a check and balance against the unlimited authority of the executive branch to hold certain individuals indefinitely without being charged with any crime. That is a serious flaw, I believe, in the Military Commissions Act, and one that must be corrected. Secondly, this legislation would significantly narrow the very vague definition under the Military Commissions Act of unlawful enemy combatants in existing law to individuals who are directly participating in a zone of the active military combat against the United States and who are not lawful enemy combatants, regular soldiers. It would also include in that definition anyone involved in the attacks against the United States on 9/11, 2001. Under existing law, the definition is so broad, in my view, that individuals picked up on the streets of Hartford, Connecticut, or Newark, New Jersey, could literally be deemed to be an unlawful enemy combatant and denied the standard trial procedures and protections that are existing, that are available under the existing federal statutes. Thirdly, the bill would prohibit the introduction of evidence against individuals through torture or coercion from being introduced at evidence at trial, regardless of when the evidence was developed. You'll recall that under the existing law, evidence developed prior to the Detainee Treatment Act of 2005 is not excludable at trial, even if gained through torture and coercion. Since most of the detainees were apprehended and transferred to Guantanamo before December 30, 2005, when the bill became law, the prohibition against torture and coercion and evidence gathered through those means, as currently included in existing law, is meaningless in my view. Fourthly and lastly, the legislation would also affirm America's commitment to the letter and spirit of the Geneva Conventions. We were the architect, the United States was, of the Geneva Conventions. These are the protections and guarantees of our servicemen and women who are in harm's way for being maltreated by enemies who apprehend them. It is, I think, a great mistake for the United States to be moving away from the very structures which we helped create in the wake of World War II and the Nuremberg trials. And so my hope would be that we'd restore that here under this legislation. Today, we'd limit the authority of the President to unilaterally reinterpret provisions of the Geneva Convention and make his actions subject to congressional and judicial oversight. We in Congress, I think, have an obligation to work in a bipartisan way to repair the damage that's been done, to protect our international reputation, and to preserve our domestic traditions, and to provide a successful mechanism to improve and enhance the tools required by the global war on terror. I intend to work with my colleagues to enact this legislation. I'm thankful for those who already co-sponsored it. Let me turn to my colleague from New Jersey.
Well, one of the saddest days I've spent in public life in the United States Senate occurred last fall when the Senate of the United States passed the Military Commissions Act, which was a major setback for the country. This was to eliminate habeas corpus so that people wouldn't have any idea what they were being charged with in the country. A major step back for us and a major retreat from the Geneva Conventions. I was stunned that we weren't able to gather more votes to oppose that legislation and stop it from going into law. So to respond to that, I've introduced legislation called the Effective Terrorist Prosecution Act, which I'll introduce next Tuesday. And I'm asking you to listen to this because I'd like you to become, in effect, a citizen co-sponsor of this and to invite friends, neighbors, and others you may be talking with or communicating with to join us in this effort. I want to see us get back as a nation that supports the rule of law. That was our tradition, by and large, over the last 50 years of the 20th century, as a result of the Nuremberg experience, where this nation stood for the rule of law. And we've watched this administration retreat from those standards, and as a result, I think the world is a more dangerous place today because we're unwilling to stand up for the rule of law. The Geneva Conventions are tremendously important. They protect our troops. They make it possible for us to gather better information. You may get real prosecutions here of people who are really threatening to do us harm or may have done us harm. And it's going to be critically important that we build the relationships around the world that will allow us to have in a century, a 21st century, of more prosperity, hope, and dealing with those who would do us real harm. So for all of those reasons, we need more support for this Effective Terrorist Prosecution Act, and I'm urging you to become a part of it.